I can't do this anymore, Holly. The words hung in the dusty air of the Wyoming ranch house like a death sentence. Cole Brennan's scarred hands gripped the edge of the wooden table, knuckles white as bleached bone. The woman standing across from him, thin as a rail, her Eastern dress now patched and faded, went perfectly still. Can't do what? Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but her two children, huddled by the fireplace, looked up with eyes too old for their small faces. Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small, heartfelt favor to ask. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up. It costs you nothing but means the world to me. And let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you are watching from. Your support truly makes all the difference. This, he gestured vaguely at the space between them, at the makeshift family they'd built from desperation and necessity. Pretending this arrangement is something it ain't. Holly Ashford's chin lifted. That same defiant gesture he'd come to know in the 3 months since she'd appeared at his door more dead than alive. Her son and daughter clinging to her tattered skirts. But now her hands trembled as they smoothed her apron. I see. 2 words, flat as the prairie stretching endlessly beyond the window. The little girl, Emma, barely 5, made a small sound. Her brother Jesse, 7, pulled her closer. Ma'am, I didn't mean, Cole started, but the look in Holly's gray eyes stopped him cold. It wasn't anger, it was resignation. The look of a woman who'd been abandoned before and had learned to survive it. We'll leave at first light, she said, turning toward the children with shoulders squared like a soldier facing execution. But how had it come to this? How had a desperate knock on a lonely cowboy's door 3 months ago led to this moment of devastating choice? That's where our story truly begins. Not with the ending I just showed you, but with the beginning that made that ending possible. And I promise you nothing about this tale is what you expect. Let me take you back to where it all started, to a September evening in 1882, when the wind carried more than just a scent of sage and dust. It carried the sound of desperate knuckles rapping against worn pine, and the faint, heartbreaking whisper of children who'd forgotten what a full belly felt like. The knock came just as the sun bled red across the Bighorn Mountains, painting Cole Brennan's isolated ranch in shades of copper and shadow. Cole froze mid-motion, the tin plate in his hand suspended above the wash basin. Nobody came out here. Not anymore. Not since Rebecca and the baby had been buried on the hill 3 years past. Not since he'd made it abundantly clear to the folks in Redemption Creek that he preferred the company of horses in solitude to human conversation. The knock came again. Weaker this time. Desperate. His hand moved instinctively to the Colt 45 on his hip as he crossed the rough-hewn floorboards. Wyoming territory wasn't kind to the careless, and unexpected visitors after dark usually meant trouble of one variety or another. He pulled the door open with his left hand, gun drawn with his right. What stood on his porch made him lower the weapon immediately. A woman, if you could call the skeletal figure wrapped in a traveling dress a woman, swayed on his doorstep. Her face, probably pretty once, was now gaunt as a death mask, smudged with trail dust and something that looked like old bruises. But it was her eyes that stopped his breath. Gray as storm clouds, they held a peculiar combination of fierce dignity and utter desperation. Behind her, partially hidden by her filthy skirts, 2 small faces peered up at him, a boy and a girl, both thin as fence posts, with the same gray eyes as their mother. Please, the woman said, her voice cracking like dry leather. My children haven't eaten in 3 days. I can work, I can cook, clean, mend, anything. I just need... She swayed again, and Cole found himself reaching out instinctively to steady her. Her skin burned with fever beneath his calloused palm. Ma'am, you need to sit, he started, but she shook her head violently. No, Charity, she said, those gray eyes blazing even as her body threatened to collapse. I work for what's mine. I won't be beholden. Just give my children something to eat, and I'll earn it. I swear to you, I'll earn every crumb. The little girl started crying, a thin, exhausted sound that reminded Cole of a dying calf. The boy, couldn't have been more than 7, put his arm around his sister while glaring at Cole with protective fury that would have been admirable if it wasn't so heartbreaking. When's the last time you ate? Cole asked, though he already knew the answer. He'd seen this kind of starvation during the war, during the winter of '63 when supplies ran out and men started looking like walking corpses. That doesn't matter. The woman's chin lifted in that defiant gesture, even as she gripped his doorframe to keep from falling. I can work. I'm educated. I taught school in Philadelphia before my husband. She stopped abruptly, and Cole saw pain flash across her features that had nothing to do with hunger. I can read, write, cipher. I can cook anything you've got provisions for. I can mend shirts, tend gardens, even help with livestock if needed. My father was a doctor, and he taught me some. I can... Lady, Cole's voice came out rougher than he intended. I don't give a damn about your qualifications right now. Your kids are about to collapse, and you've got fever that could kill you before morning. Questions come later. Get inside. He expected argument. That stubborn lift of her chin promised it, but instead she simply nodded once and then crumpled. Cole caught her before she hit the porch. She weighed nothing, just bones and fever and threadbare cotton. The children gasped, and the boy moved forward with small fists raised. What did you do to my ma? His voice shook but held steady, and Cole respected that even as he adjusted the woman's weight in his arms. Your ma just fainted from fever and hunger, son. I'm going to put her on my bed and get you both some food. Then we'll figure out what's what. Fair enough? The boy studied him with eyes far too old for his face, then nodded slowly. You promise you won't hurt her? I promise. Cole meant it. Whatever his faults, and God knew he had plenty, he'd never raised a hand to a woman or child, and he wasn't about to start now. He carried the unconscious woman inside, the children trailing behind like cautious rabbits. His cabin was sparse. Just the main room with a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, and a bedroom barely big enough for the narrow bed Rebecca had slept in alone those last few months before the fever took her. He laid the stranger on that same bed, noting the way she muttered something incomprehensible in her delirium. You two sit at the table, he told the children, his voice gentler than it had been in years. I've got leftover stew from supper, and there's cornbread. You eat slow, understand? Your bellies ain't used to being full, and I don't need you getting sick on top of everything else. The little girl whimpered, and the boy nodded seriously. Yes, sir, Ma told us the same thing. She made us eat slow when we had food, so we wouldn't waste it being sick. Smart woman, Cole thought as he ladled generous portions into 2 bowls. Smart and proud, and currently burning up with fever in his bed. He set the bowls in front of the children and watched as they fell on the food with desperate restraint, trying so hard to eat slowly even though their bodies screamed for more. What are your names? He asked, fetching water from the bucket by the door. Jessie, the boy said between careful bites. This is Emma. She's 5, I'm 7. Ma's name is Holly Ashford. We came from Philadelphia on the train, then took a stage to, I forget the town's name. Then Ma bought spots on a wagon headed to California, but his voice faltered. But what? Cole prompted gently. Jessie's face hardened. The wagon master took Ma's money and left us in that last town. Said women with kids were bad luck and slowed everyone down. Ma sold almost everything we had left to get us this far. She said there were ranches out here, places that needed help. She said if we could just find someone decent, we could work and start over. Rage, hot and familiar, flared in Cole's chest. He'd seen this before. Widows cheated, abandoned, left to die by men who called themselves Christians. The war had made plenty of widows, and the frontier seemed designed to kill off what the war hadn't finished. Your pa? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Dead. Emma spoke for the first time, her small voice, matter of fact. Fell down the stairs at work. Ma says he didn't suffer, but I heard her crying at night. Cole nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Well, you're safe here tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. Jessie looked up at him with those 2 old eyes. Are you going to send us away? The question hung in the air like smoke, and Cole found himself looking back toward the bedroom where Holly Ashford lay burning with fever, proud even in unconsciousness. He should say yes. He should feed them, let them rest, then point them toward Redemption Creek, where the church ladies would make charity cases of them. He'd spent 3 years building walls around his heart and letting strangers in, especially ones with gray eyes and stubborn chins, was asking for the kind of pain he'd sworn never to feel again. But when he opened his mouth, different words emerged. The fever raged for 2 days, and in those 48 hours, Cole learned more about Holly Ashford than she probably would have told him in a year of careful conversation. Delirium, he discovered during the war, had a way of stripping away every civilized pretense. It revealed the truth beneath the social graces, and Holly's truth was equal parts heartbreaking and infuriating. "Please, Mr. Ashford," she mumbled on the first night, thrashing weakly against the thin blanket Cole had tucked around her. "The children need to eat. Just a little. Please, I'll take less. I don't need much." Cole, sitting in the straight-back chair he'd dragged in from the main room, felt his jaw tighten. So the late Mr. Ashford had been the kind of man who let his family go hungry while he, what, drank? Gambled? Cole had known plenty of that type. The war had created them, or maybe just revealed what had always been there. "Thomas, no." Her voice shifted, younger now, afraid. "Father said you couldn't court me. Father said you weren't, oh God, the baby's coming too early, too early." She cried out then, a sound of such profound grief that Cole found himself gripping her burning hand without thinking, his thumb tracing circles on her palm the way Rebecca used to do when nightmares took him. "You're safe," he heard himself say, his voice rough with disuse. "Kids are fine, they're sleeping. You're safe." Her eyes flickered open, gray as winter sky, unfocused but desperate. "Jesse? Emma?" "Right in the other room, both sleeping like logs after 3 bowls of stew each. Now you rest." She studied his face for a long moment, and Cole had the unsettling feeling she was seeing straight through to all the broken pieces he kept locked away. Then she whispered, "Thank you," and slipped back into fevered dreams. Jesse appeared in the doorway, a small shadow in Cole's old work shirt that hung to his ankles like a nightgown. "Is Ma dying?" The question was asked with such calm resignation that it cut worse than if the boy had been crying. Cole gestured him closer. "Not if I have anything to say about it. Fever's bad, but I've seen worse. She's fighting." "Ma always fights." Jesse sat on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding his mother's restless legs. "Pa used to say she was stubborn as a Missouri mule. He didn't mean it nice." "Tell me about your pa," Cole said, not sure why he wanted to know, just certain that he did. Jesse was quiet for a long moment, his small hand resting on his mother's arm. "Pa wasn't always mean. Ma says he changed after the factory accident. Says the pain made him different. But I remember before. He used to carry me on his shoulders and call Ma his Philadelphia Rose. Then he fell, hurt his back, and couldn't work the same. Started drinking the medicine the doctor gave him. Then other stuff. Got angry all the time. He died from falling down the stairs at work," Cole said carefully, remembering Emma's words. Jesse's face went carefully blank. "That's what the police said." The emphasis on police said wasn't lost on Cole, but he didn't push. Some stories took time to tell, and this boy had already shared more than most would. "Your ma teach school before your sister was born?" "Yes, sir, at the Quaker School for Girls. She loved it. Used to come home and tell us stories about what the girls learned, history and mathematics and Latin. Pa made her stop when Emma came. Said no wife of his was going to work like common folk, even though—" He trailed off. "Even though he wasn't bringing in enough money," Cole finished. Jesse nodded miserably. "After Pa died, the factory gave Ma some money, but it wasn't much. Landlord said we had to leave. Ma's family. She wrote them letters, but nobody wrote back. She said something about being disowned when she married Pa against their wishes. So we came west. Ma said the frontier needed teachers, and we could start over where nobody knew us. She's right. Redemption Creek's been wanting a school teacher for 2 years now." The words came out before Cole had thought them through, and he saw Jesse's face light up with hope that made Cole's chest tight. "Really? Ma could teach again?" "Maybe. We'll see what the town council says." Cole stood, needing to move, to do something with the restless energy this conversation had stirred up. "You should sleep, son. Your ma needs you strong when she wakes up." "Will you stay with her?" Jesse asked. And there was something in his voice, a need for reassurance that Cole recognized from his own childhood, from the months after his own father died and left him responsible for his mother and three younger siblings. "I'll stay," Cole promised, and he did. Through that night and the next day and the following night, leaving only to tend to the most essential chores, feeding the stock, gathering eggs, fetching water. Jesse and Emma moved through the cabin like quiet ghosts, helping where they could, staying out of the way when they couldn't. The boy proved handy with a broom, and Emma, despite her size, could carefully carry dishes from table to wash basin without dropping a single one. On the morning of the 3rd May, Cole was dozing in the chair when a voice, raspy but lucid, broke through his exhausted sleep. "Where am I?" He jerked awake to find Holly Ashford propped on one elbow, her gray eyes clear for the first time since she'd collapsed on his porch. The fever flush had faded from her cheeks, leaving her pale as milk but blessedly cool. "My ranch," he said simply, "about 5 miles northwest of Redemption Creek. You've been sick." She looked around the small bedroom, taking in the sparse furnishings, the man's clothing hanging on pegs, the lack of any feminine presence. "How long?" 2.5 days. Her hand flew to her mouth. "The children are fine, fed and safe. Boys got a talent for sweeping, and the girls got your stubborn chin." A ghost of a smile flickered across her gaunt face. "That's not a compliment where I come from. It is here." They studied each other in the gray morning light filtering through the single window. Cole saw her taking in his appearance. 3 days of beard growth, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep, shirt wrinkled from being slept in. He saw her notice the empty side of the bed, the absence of women's things, the way dust had settled on surfaces that hadn't been properly cleaned in years. "You're alone here," she said finally. Not a question. "I am." "A wife?" "Dead. 3 years past. Her and our baby daughter." Something in Holly's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Cole stood, suddenly needing distance from the sympathy in her eyes. "You need food. Something light. Broth. Maybe some bread. I'll have Jesse bring it." "Mr." She hesitated. "I don't know your name." "Brennan. Cole Brennan." "What Brennan?" She struggled to sit up fully, and he moved instinctively to help despite himself, piling the thin pillow behind her back. "I need to know what I owe you. For the food, the care, the use of your bed. I'll work it off, every cent. I won't be beholden to—" "Lady," he interrupted, his voice harder than he intended, "you nearly died on my doorstep. Your kids were starving. There's no debt. You rest, get your strength back, then we'll talk about what comes next." Her chin lifted, that gesture again, and Cole felt something shift in his chest. Dangerous. This woman was dangerous to the careful walls he'd built. "I work for what's mine," she said, her voice steady despite her weakness. "I won't be charity. I can't be. Do you understand?" He did. Pride was sometimes the only thing keeping you alive when everything else tried to kill you. "I understand." "Then tell me what you need done. I'm not strong yet, but I can mend, I can prepare food, I can teach your son to read if he's not my son." "Oh." Confusion flickered across her face. "I thought Jesse said you'd been kind, and I assumed—" "You assumed wrong." Cole moved toward the door, needing out of this room that suddenly felt too small. "I'll send the boy with food. You eat, rest, and we'll figure out the details later." By the 4th day, Holly was well enough to sit at the table for meals, though Cole noticed she still moved carefully, her body not quite recovered from the ordeal of starvation and fever. She'd insisted on mending his shirts despite his protests, and now sat in Rebecca's old rocking chair by the fireplace, needle flashing in the lamplight, while Jesse and Emma slept on pallets Cole had made up near the hearth. The children had taken to ranch life with surprising ease, Jesse following Cole around like a devoted shadow during morning chores, Emma chattering to the chickens as she collected eggs with the careful reverence of a child who remembered real hunger. "You're quiet," Holly observed, not looking up from the shirt she was mending. "Jesse says you don't talk much." Cole, seated at the table with his account book spread before him, grunted non-committally. He'd been trying to calculate whether his savings would stretch far enough to take on help, real help, the kind he paid for, because the thought of sending Holly and the children back out into the world was starting to eat at him in ways he didn't want to examine too closely. I don't mean to pry, she continued, her voice soft enough not to wake the children. But Jesse's been asking questions, and I'd rather hear the truth from you than make up stories to satisfy a curious 7-year-old. What kind of questions? About your wife? About why you live alone? About whether we're staying? Cole's jaw tightened. What did you tell him? That it wasn't my business to share your story, and I didn't know about the staying part because we haven't discussed it. She set down the mending and looked at him directly. So I'm asking now, plainly, are we staying? The question hung between them like smoke. Cole marked his place in the ledgers and leaned back in his chair, studying this woman who'd appeared on his doorstep like some kind of test from a god he'd stopped believing in 3 years ago. Town needs a school teacher, he heard himself say. Redemption. Ion Creek, 5 miles south. The last teacher got married and moved to California 2 years back. Council's been advertising in Eastern papers, but nobody wants to come out this far for the wages they're offering. Hope bloomed in Holly's eyes, bright and painful to witness. Are you saying? I'm saying I could put in a word with the council, tell them about a qualified teacher from Philadelphia looking for a position. They'd likely hire you on the spot. And housing? The children and we'd need somewhere to teacher's cottage. Comes with the position. Nothing fancy, but it's sound. 2 rooms, a good stove, well water nearby. Holly's hands trembled as she pressed them to her lap. Mr. Brennan, I don't know what to say. This is more than I'd hoped for. I thought perhaps I could work for you, earn enough to move on eventually, but a real position, a home. There's a condition, Cole interrupted, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. Her expression shifted immediately, hope mixing with wariness. What condition? You'd need a husband, or at least the appearance of one. Silence fell over the cabin, broken only by the pop and crackle of the fire. Holly's face had gone carefully neutral, that protective blankness Cole recognized from their first meeting. I see, she said finally, her voice full out. And I suppose you have someone in mind for this arrangement? Me. The single word dropped between them like a gunshot. Holly flinched, and Cole saw her grip tighten on the mending in her lap. Let me be clear, he continued, forcing himself to meet her eyes. I'm not proposing a real marriage. I'm proposing a practical arrangement. You need protection in a position in a town that won't hire an unmarried woman to teach their children. I need... He hesitated, not sure how to explain the loneliness that had carved him hollow, the way his cabin felt like a tomb, the desperate need to hear voices that weren't just echoes of the dead. I need someone to help with the household, someone to cook and mend and keep the place from falling apart. A housekeeper, Holly said, her voice still flat. That's what you're looking for. A wife on paper. We'd go to the town clerk, sign the register, tell the council you're Mrs. Brennan and you're looking for the teaching position. You'd live at the teacher's cottage in town during the school year, come back here summers to help with the garden and preserving. Separate arrangements, separate lives, but enough of an appearance to satisfy propriety. And what do you get out of this, Mr. Brennan? Besides a housekeeper you'll barely see for 9 months of the year? The question was sharp, and Cole respected her for asking it. Land grant preference goes to married men. I've been trying to expand my holdings, but the territorial office keeps passing me over for men with families. With a wife, even a wife in name only, I'd have better standing. So we'd be using each other, Holly said slowly. Mutually beneficial deception. I prefer to think of it as mutually beneficial survival. Cole stood, needing to move, to pace away some of the tension coiling in his gut. Look, I know it's not romantic. I know it's not what a woman dreams of when she thinks about marriage, but it's practical, safe. Your children would have a home, regular meals, a stepfather on paper who won't hurt them. You'd have a profession and independence. I'd have help and better legal standing. Holly was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. Then she asked, why me? You could find a widow in town, someone without complications like children. Because you appeared on my doorstep, and I made you a promise that you'd be safe. The words came out rougher than intended. Because your boy looks at me like I'm the first man who hasn't disappointed him. And your girl reminds me of the daughter I lost. Because you've got pride and backbone, and you don't want charity any more than I want pity. Because we both know what it's like to lose everything and have to build from nothing. He stopped pacing and faced her directly. But mostly because I don't want to watch you walk away not knowing if you'll survive out there. The frontier eats women like you alive, educated, proud, unwilling to bend. You need protection, even if it's just my name on a piece of paper. And I need to know I did right by you, that I didn't just put you back out in the world to starve or worse. Holly's eyes had gone bright with unshed tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. What would the children call you? Whatever they're comfortable with, Mr. Brennan, Cole, doesn't matter. And the sleeping arrangements, you said separate, but I need to know. Separate, Cole said firmly, completely separate. You'd have your cottage in town most of the year. When you're here, you'd have the bedroom. I'll sleep in the barn or make a pallet by the fire. I'm not asking for that. I'm not asking for anything except help with the household and the appearance of respectability. You're asking for a lie, Holly said quietly. I'm offering a solution. She studied him for a long moment, and Cole had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing things he'd rather keep hidden. The loneliness, the desperate need to fill the silence, the way he'd started talking to Rebecca's grave just to hear his own voice. I need time to think, she said finally. Take all the time you need. But even as he said it, Cole knew what her answer would be. He'd seen it in her eyes when he mentioned the teacher's cottage, heard it in her voice when she asked about the children. Holly Ashford was a survivor, and survivors didn't turn down lifelines, even ones attached to complicated men with more ghosts than future. Holly's answer came at dawn the next morning, delivered as Cole was saddling his mare for the ride into Redemption Creek. I accept your terms, Mr. Brennan, with one condition of my own. He turned to find her standing in the barn doorway, morning light turning her loose hair to copper. She'd borrowed one of Rebecca's old dresses. Cole had dug them from the trunk where he'd packed them away 3 years ago, and though it hung loose on her thin frame, she wore it with the same dignity she'd shown up in rags. What condition? He kept his hands busy with the saddle straps, not trusting himself to look at her directly. If either of us wishes to dissolve the arrangement, we do so honestly. No abandonment, no disappearing in the night. We speak plainly, settle affairs fairly, and part as friends, if possible. Cole's hands stilled on the leather. You planning on leaving? No, but my husband taught me that plans and reality rarely align. I want assurance that if circumstances change, I will handle it like civilized people. Civilized. He let out a harsh laugh. Haven't been accused of that in a while. Nevertheless, he turned to face her fully. All right, we have an agreement, Mrs. Ashford. Soon to be Mrs. Brennan. Something flickered in her expression. Apprehension, maybe, or resignation. When? Today. We'll ride to town, see the clerk, then meet with the school council. They hold sessions every Thursday morning at the church. If we time it right, we can be married and employed by noon. That's very efficient. That's survival. He led the mare out of the barn, noting how Holly stepped back to give him room. She was still cautious around him, still waiting for the other boot to drop. He didn't blame her. You'll need to bring the children. They'll want to see the cottage before you agree to anything, and the council will want to meet them. Jesse's afraid, Holly said quietly. He thinks this is too good to be true, that you'll change your mind. He's a smart kid. Will you change your mind? Cole swung into the saddle and looked down at her. I gave my word, Mrs. Ashford. Where I come from, that means something. I don't go back on my word. Even when it's inconvenient? Especially then. The ride to Redemption Creek took an hour, with Jesse and Emma sharing the mare while Cole walked alongside and Holly rode his steady gelding, Caesar. The children were subdued, Jesse casting worried glances at his mother, while Emma hummed quietly to herself, a tuneless sound that reminded Cole painfully of Rebecca. The town appeared gradually over the last rise, a collection of weathered buildings huddled around a single main street like pioneers circled against an attack. which Cole supposed wasn't far from the truth. Redemption Creek had been founded 15 years earlier by prospectors chasing silver dreams. The silver had played out, but the town remained, sustained now by ranching and the stubborn determination of people too broke or too proud to move on. It's small, Holly observed, and Cole couldn't tell if she was disappointed or relieved. About 200 souls, give or take, general store, saloon, blacksmith, church, and the school. Doc visits once a month from Fort Laramie. We've got a post office as of last year, and the telegraph line reached us in '80. Civilization marches west, Holly murmured, then added, where's the teacher's cottage? Cole pointed to a small structure behind the church, white clapboard with green shutters, a covered porch, and a neat garden plot currently gone to weeds. Previous teacher kept it nice, been sitting empty since she left. It's perfect, Holly breathed, and Cole saw naked hope in her face before she remembered to guard her expression. They dismounted in front of the town clerk's office, a narrow building sandwiched between the general store and the undertaker. Jessie held Emma's hand while Holly smoothed her borrowed dress with shaking fingers. You sure about this? Cole asked, giving her one last chance to back out. Holly looked at her children, then at the cottage behind the church, then finally at Cole. I'm sure. Are you? Asked you, fool, first. So you did. She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. Then let's become legally bound strangers, Mr. Brennan. The clerk, a dried-up prune of a man named Silas Kemp, barely looked up from his ledger when they entered. Help you? Need to register a marriage, Cole said. That got Kemp's attention. His roomy eyes widened as he took in Cole, known throughout the territory as the hermit rancher who'd turned mean after his wife died, and the thin woman with 2 children standing at his side. A marriage. You and Mrs. Holly Ashford. She's a widow from Philadelphia, and we're making it legal today. Kemp's gaze sharpened with curiosity barely contained by professional courtesy. Any objections to the union? Previous commitments? None, Holly said firmly. My previous husband is deceased, and Mr. Brennan's wife likewise. We've both observed appropriate mourning periods. Documentation? Holly reached into the small bag she carried, one of the few possessions that had survived the journey west, and produced a folded paper. My husband's death certificate, issued by the Philadelphia coroner's office. Kemp examined it with the thoroughness of a man who'd seen his share of fraudulent documents. Seems in order, Mr. Brennan. Cole handed over Rebecca's death certificate, yellowed now, and creased from being carried in his wallet. Kemp studied it, noted something in his ledger, then pulled out the marriage register. Names and dates of birth? They provided the information. Holly was 26, 4 years younger than Cole, while Kemp scratched away with his pen. Jessie and Emma watched with wide eyes, and Cole realized this might be the first legal proceeding they'd witnessed that didn't involve their father's death or their mother's destitution. Reason for marriage? Kemp asked, and Cole felt Holly tense beside him. Mutual benefit and companionship, Cole said flatly, daring the clerk to question it. Kemp sniffed but wrote it down. Witnesses? The children can... Holly started, but Kemp shook his head. Need adults, 2 of them. Sheriff's usually willing, and I can serve as the second. Wait here. He shuffled out, leaving them alone in the dusty office. Jessie tugged on Holly's skirt. Ma, what's happening? Mr. Brennan and I are getting married, sweetheart. It means he'll take care of us, legally. Like a real pia? Emma asked, her small voice hopeful. Cole crouched down to her level, meeting those gray eyes so like her mother's. Not like a real pa. Your pa was your pa, and nobody replaces that. But I'll be someone you can count on. Someone who'll make sure you've got food and a home and safety. Can you understand that? Emma considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd seen too much. Will you hurt Ma like Pa did sometimes? The question hit like a fist. Cole heard Holly's sharp intake of breath, saw Jessie's face harden with protective fury. No, Cole said simply. Never. You have my word, and my word is my bond. What does that mean? Emma persisted. It means when I promise something, I keep it. Always. Oh. Emma thought about this, then nodded. Okay. The ceremony, if you could call it that, took less than 5 minutes. Sheriff Tom Hadley, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, arrived with Silas Kemp, and both men stood as witnesses while Cole and Holly repeated the necessary words. No music, no flowers, no celebration. Just legal phrases in a dusty office while two children watched their mother marry a stranger for survival's sake. By the power vested in me by Wyoming territory, Kemp intoned nasally, I pronounce you husband and wife. Registration number 347, witnessed and sealed. That'll be $2 for the certificate. Cole paid from his dwindling cash reserves and accepted the paper Kemp held out. Official proof that Holly Ashford was now Holly Brennan, at least in the eyes of the law. Congratulations, Sheriff Hadley said, though his eyes were sharp as he studied them both. This is sudden, Cole. Known you 5 years, and you haven't so much as looked at a woman since Rebecca passed. Times change, Cole said shortly. Indeed they do. Hadley shifted his gaze to Holly, and his expression softened. Ma'am, welcome to Redemption Creek. I hope you will be happy here. Thank you, Sheriff. Holly's voice was steady, but Cole saw her grip tighten on Jesse's shoulder. We're grateful for the welcome. The school council's meeting in 20 minutes, Kemp said, already turning back to his ledger. If you're wanting that teaching position, best not keep them waiting. They're particular about punctuality. The church sat at the end of Main Street, a simple white structure with a bell tower that leaned slightly to the left. The council, 5 men and 2 women representing the town's most established families, waited in the front pews, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Cole knew most of them. Ezra Walsh, who ran the general store, Martha Henderson, the pastor's wife, Samuel Cross, the largest rancher besides Cole, and Judge William Porter, who served as both council chairman and the closest thing Redemption Creek had to proper legal authority. Mr. Brennan, Judge Porter said, his bushy eyebrows rising. This is unexpected. We heard you'd taken in some travelers, but marriage? That's quite a development. This is my wife, Holly Brennan, Cole said, resting his hand lightly on Holly's back, a gesture that felt both foreign and strangely right. She's a qualified teacher from Philadelphia, and I understand you're in need of one. The council members exchanged glances. Martha Henderson leaned forward, her sharp eyes taking in Holly's borrowed dress and thin frame. A teacher? What are your qualifications, Mrs. Brennan? Holly stepped forward, and Cole saw her transform. Gone was the desperate widow. In her place stood an educated woman with backbone and pride. I taught at the Quaker Girls Academy in Philadelphia for 3 years before my children were born. I'm certified in English literature, mathematics through calculus, basic Latin and French, history, and natural sciences. I have experience with students aged 5 through 15, and I believe strongly in both classical education and practical skills. Impressive, Judge Porter admitted. Do you have documentation? I do. Holly reached into her bag again and produced a worn leather portfolio. Letters of recommendation from the Academy's headmistress and 3 parents. My teaching certificate from the Pennsylvania Board of Education. And examples of lesson plans I developed for mixed-age classrooms. The council passed the documents around, and Cole watched their skepticism slowly transform into interest. Samuel Cross cleared his throat. The position pays $15 monthly, plus use of the teacher's cottage and a small stipend for supplies. School runs September through May, 6 days a week. You'd be responsible for teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and whatever additional subjects you deem appropriate for children aged 5 through 14. We currently have 17 students enrolled. That's quite manageable, Holly said calmly. Would I have freedom to structure the curriculum, or do you have specific requirements? Freedom within reason, Martha Henderson said. We want our children educated, Mrs. Brennan, not just minded. The last teacher was competent but uninspired. The children learned their letters and numbers, but nothing more. We were hoping for someone who could actually teach. I can teach, Holly said, and there was steel in her voice. Given the opportunity and the trust, I can prepare your children for lives beyond Redemption Creek, if that's what they choose. Or I can give them the tools to build better lives here. Either way, they'll learn to think, not just recite. Judge Porter smiled, the first genuine smile Cole had seen in the meeting. When can you start? Monday, Holly said without hesitation. That gives me 3 days to settle in the cottage. review the available materials, and prepare initial lesson plans. The cottage needs cleaning, Martha warned. It's been sitting empty for months. My children and I are accustomed to hard work, Mrs. Henderson. We'll manage. More glances exchanged among the council, then Judge Porter nodded decisively. The position is yours, Mrs. Brennan. Welcome to Redemption Creek's teaching staff. We'll have the cottage key ready this afternoon, along with your first month's salary in advance to help with supplies. Holly's composure cracked just slightly, a tremor in her hands, a brightness in her eyes. Thank you. You won't regret this. See that we don't, Samuel Cross said gruffly. Education's important in these parts. Can't build civilization without it. As they left the church, Jesse and Emma trailing behind, Holly turned to Cole with an expression he couldn't quite read. Well, Mr. Brennan, it seems our arrangement is working out exactly as you predicted. Seems so. Do you ever make plans that don't work out? All the time, Cole said honestly. Just don't usually admit it. She almost smiled at that, and something in Cole's chest loosened fractionally. I should see the cottage. Start planning what needs doing. I'll help. You're not strong enough yet to be hauling furniture and scrubbing floors. I'm stronger than I look. Didn't say you weren't, but you're also still recovering, whether you want to admit it or not. Take the help, Holly. That's what this arrangement is about, helping each other. This time she did smile, faint but genuine. You're a strange man, Cole Brennan. You're not the first to mention it. The cottage proved to be in better condition than Cole had feared. The previous teacher had left it neat, and the main problems were dust, cobwebs, and the musty smell of longue durable Suze. The furniture was basic but serviceable. A bed in the main room, a smaller pallet in the side room that would serve as the children's space, a table and chairs, a cast iron stove, and shelves lining one wall for books and supplies. It's wonderful, Holly breathed, running her hand over the table's worn surface. Jesse, Emma, look, you'll have your own room, a real room with a door and everything. The children explored with careful reverence, as if afraid the cottage might disappear if they moved too quickly. Cole watched them through the window while Holly stood in the middle of the main room, slowly turning to take it all in. I thought I'd have to fight for this, she said quietly. I thought they'd see a desperate widow with children and turn me away. Your credentials did most of the work. Your name did the rest. She looked at him directly. They hired me because I'm Mrs. Cole Brennan. They wouldn't have given Holly Ashford a second glance, no matter what papers I carried. Does that bother you? It should. It should bother me very much that I needed a man's name to get what I earned through my own effort. She paused. But honestly, I'm too grateful to be bothered. That probably makes me a terrible suffragist. Makes you a survivor, Cole said. Nothing terrible about that. The transformation of the teacher's cottage happened over the next 3 days, and Cole found himself drawn into it despite his intentions to maintain distance. Holly had a vision for the space, not fancy, she was too practical for that, but warm, homey. The kind of place where children could learn without fear, where books were treasures rather than burdens. She scrubbed floors while Cole repaired the loose board in the porch. She washed windows while he chopped firewood. Jesse and Emma hauled water and arranged the small library of books the town provided, worn primers, and a handful of classics donated by families hoping their children would actually read them. Mr. Brennan, Holly said on the second day, catching him as he was replacing a cracked window pane, you don't need to do all this. Our arrangement doesn't require. It requires you not collapsing from exhaustion before school even starts. He interrupted, not looking up from his work. You're still recovering, and you're trying to do too much too fast. I'm fine. You're stubborn. He glanced at her and saw the dark circles under her eyes, the way she moved stiffly from overexertion. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Tonight, Cole said firmly, you sleep. Jesse and Emma are settled, the cottage is livable, and you've got Sunday to finish preparations. You're no good to those 17 students if you collapse in front of them Monday morning. You're very bossy for a man who claimed he wanted minimal involvement in my life. The words were sharp, but there was no real heat behind them. Cole recognized the tone. the desperate defense of someone too proud to admit they needed help. I'm bossy about people not dying from fool stubbornness, he said. Seen too many bodies that wouldn't have been bodies if they just stopped and rested when they needed to. The war? And after. He finished with the window pane and stepped back to inspect his work. War taught me people are fragile. Frontier taught me they're also too damn stubborn for their own good. Holly was quiet for a moment, then, Rebecca, your wife, how did she? Cole's jaw tightened. He'd known the question would come eventually, but that didn't make it easier. Fever, same one that almost took you. She was 7 months along with our second baby, and the fever came on fast. Doc couldn't get there in time. Roads were washed out from spring floods. She lasted 3 days. Baby died with her. I'm sorry. You already said that. I know, but I mean it more now that I know the details. Losing someone is hard. Losing them while they're carrying your child, I can't imagine. Cole turned away, not wanting her to see his face. It was 3 years ago. I should be past it. Should be and are aren't the same thing. Holly's voice was gentle, understanding in a way that made his chest ache. My husband died 10 months ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times it feels like another lifetime. You loved him? Even though he... Cole gestured vaguely, unable to articulate what Jesse had implied about Thomas Ashford. I loved who he was before the pain and the medicine changed him. I mourned that man long before he actually died. She picked up the broom and started sweeping again, her movements methodical. The man who fell down those factory stairs, I don't know if I loved him anymore. I was just tired. Tired of being afraid. Tired of never knowing which version of him would walk through the door. When the police came to tell me he was dead, my first feeling was relief. Does that make me a terrible person? Makes you honest. Jesse thinks I killed him, you know. The words dropped between them like stones. Cole froze. What? Not directly, but he heard the police questioning me. Heard them ask about the bruises on my arms, about Thomas's drinking, about whether we'd argued that morning. He heard them imply that maybe I'd pushed Thomas down those stairs. They eventually ruled it accidental. The foreman testified Thomas was drunk and unsteady, but Jesse heard enough to wonder. He's never asked me directly, but I see the question in his eyes sometimes. Did you? Cole asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, not my business. But Holly shook her head. It's a fair question, given that we're legally bound now. No, I didn't push him. Thomas was drunk, as he was most mornings. He stumbled on the stairs, lost his balance, and fell 3 flights. The doctors said he died instantly. I was home with the children when it happened. But sometimes I wonder if Jesse would believe me if I told him, or if he'd think I was lying to protect myself. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. He'd believe you. Would he? I'm not sure I'd believe me if I were in his position. She stopped sweeping and looked at Cole directly. I didn't love Thomas at the end. I didn't mourn him the way a good wife should. And when he died, my first thought wasn't grief. It was, how will we eat? Does that haunt me? Yes, every single day. But did I push him? No, I would never, no matter how bad things got. Cole believed her. He'd seen enough liars during the war to recognize truth when it stood in front of him wearing a borrowed dress and wielding a broom like a weapon against dust and memories. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For trusting me with that. Can't have been easy. Holly managed a small smile. You shared your story. Seemed fair to share mine. We're married after all, even if it's just on paper. Just on paper. The phrase echoed in Cole's mind as he rode back to his ranch that evening, the late September sun painting the mountains gold. This was supposed to be a practical arrangement. Help for him, protection for her, mutual benefit without emotional entanglement. So why did it feel like something more was already taking root, fragile and dangerous as spring grass pushing through frost-hard ground? School started Monday morning under gray skies that threatened rain but never quite delivered. Cole hadn't planned to attend. Holly didn't need him hovering, and he had work at the ranch that couldn't wait. But somehow he found himself saddling Caesar at dawn and riding to town anyway. He told himself it was just to make sure everything went smoothly. that the town accepted Holly, that no one gave her trouble about being an outsider. The truth, which he didn't want to examine too closely, was that he wanted to see her in her element, wanted to watch her become something more than the desperate woman who'd collapsed on his porch. The schoolhouse stood at the north end of town, a single large room with windows on three sides and a stove in the corner. Cole arrived as families were dropping off their children, and he hung back by the livery stable watching. Holly stood on the schoolhouse steps in a dress Martha Henderson had donated, proper teacher's attire in sensible dark blue. Her hair was pulled back severely, her posture straight as a rifle barrel. She greeted each child by name. She must have memorized the enrollment list and said something to make each one smile before they entered. Jesse and Emma stood beside her, looking nervous but proud. They'd be her students now, just like the others. But Cole noticed how the town children kept their distance. Outsiders were always viewed with suspicion in small frontier communities, and children could be crueler than adults in their exclusion. Quite a sight, isn't it? Cole turned to find Sheriff Hadley beside him, also watching the school. "What is?" Cole asked, though he knew exactly what the sheriff meant. Cole Brennan, standing in town, watching his wife start her first day of work. If someone had told me a month ago this would happen, I'd have called them a liar and bought them a drink for the entertainment value. Things change. Indeed they do. Hadley's tone was carefully neutral. "You want to tell me what's really going on here, Bohm? Because the whole town's buzzing about your sudden marriage to a widow from the East, and I'd rather hear the truth from you than depend on gossip." Cole considered telling the sheriff to mind his own business. But Hadley was a good man, and more importantly, he had the power to make Holly's life difficult if he chose to. Better to give him something close to the truth. "She needed help. I needed help. We made an arrangement that benefits both of us. That's all there is to it." "An arrangement." Hadley's eyebrows rose. "That's a cold way to describe marriage." "It's an honest way." "And you're completely sure this woman isn't running from something? Trouble back east that might follow her here?" Cole had wondered the same thing, but Holly's story held together. Her credentials were real, her documents legitimate. If she was running, she was doing it from poverty and bad circumstances, not from the law. "I'm sure," he said, "she's exactly what she appears to be, a widow trying to give her kids a better life. Nothing sinister about it." Hadley studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll take your word. But Cole, if this goes sideways, if she turns out to be something other than what you think, you come to me. Don't try to handle it alone. Understand?" "Understood." The sheriff tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Cole alone with his thoughts in the distant sound of Holly's voice calling the children to order. He should leave, should ride back to the ranch and let Holly build her new life without him watching like some kind of guardian ghost. But he stayed until the schoolhouse door closed and the last parent had departed, listening to the faint sound of young voices reciting letters. The trouble started on Wednesday. Cole was in town to pick up supplies when he overheard three women talking outside the general store. He recognized them: Sarah Cross, Samuel's wife, Linda Walsh, Ezra's daughter, and Elizabeth Morrison, whose husband ran the saloon. "It's not proper," Sarah was saying, her voice carrying in the still autumn air. "A woman teaching school who was widowed less than a year ago. She should still be in mourning. And married to Cole Brennan so quickly," Linda added. "It seems rushed, desperate." "Maybe she trapped him," Elizabeth suggested. "Showed up with those children, played on his sympathy, and manipulated him into marriage. Men are fools when it comes to a woman with a sad story." Cole felt rage boil up hot and immediate. He stepped around the corner, and the women jumped at his sudden appearance. "Ladies," he said, his voice flat and dangerous, "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about my wife." Sarah had the grace to look embarrassed. The other two just looked defiant. "It's true, though, isn't it?" Elizabeth said boldly. "You hardly know this woman, and suddenly you're married? It's suspicious, Mr. Brennan. People are going to talk." "Let them talk," Cole said. "My wife is qualified, competent, and doing a job you've been desperate to fill for 2 years. If you've got problems with her teaching, take them to the school council. If you've got problems with my marriage, keep them to yourselves. Because I guarantee you don't want me as an enemy in this town. He pushed past them into the store, his hands shaking with suppressed fury. Ezra Walsh looked up from behind the counter with sympathetic eyes. Don't let them get to you, Ezra said quietly. Town gossips always find something to chew on. Give them a month and they'll move on to someone else's business. A month is too long if they're poisoning the town against Holly. They're not. Most folks are happy to have a real teacher, finally. It's just a few bitter women with nothing better to do than create drama. Ezra started gathering Cole's usual supplies. For what it's worth, I think you did a good thing, taking in that woman and her kids. They'd have died out there otherwise. I didn't take them in out of charity, Cole said, more harshly than intended. It was a practical arrangement. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night, Ezra said with a knowing smile. But you're here in town in the middle of the week when you should be working your ranch, which tells me this practical arrangement matters more than you want to admit. Cole had no response to that, so he just grunted and paid for his supplies. He found Holly at the school during the lunch break, supervising children as they played in the yard. She looked tired but animated, discussing something with two older girls, while Jessie and Emma ate their lunch on the steps. Mr. Brennan, she said, surprise clear in her voice when she noticed him. Is something wrong? Need to talk to you, private. Her expression shifted to concern, but she nodded and called to one of the older boys to watch the children. They walked behind the schoolhouse, out of sight of curious eyes. What is it? Holly asked. Town gossip. Some of the women are saying things about you, about our marriage, about it being too fast, too suspicious. I wanted you to know so you're prepared. Holly's face went carefully blank. I see. And what exactly are they saying? That you trapped me, that you're not properly mourning your husband, that the whole thing isn't respectable. Cole's jaw tightened. I told them to mind their own business, but you should expect some coldness. Maybe some parents pulling their kids from school. To his surprise, Holly didn't look upset. Instead, she let out a long breath, almost like relief. I was wondering when this would start. It's actually later than I expected. You expected it? Of course, I'm an outsider with a convenient story and a quick marriage. Gossip was inevitable. She straightened her shoulders. I can handle it, Mr. Brennan. I taught at a girls' school in Philadelphia. If I can handle wealthy matrons questioning my credentials and propriety, I can handle frontier gossips. You shouldn't have to handle it at all. But I do, so I will. She started to turn away, then paused. Thank you, though, for defending me. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You're my wife. On paper or not, that means something. Something flickered in her eyes, gratitude maybe, or surprise that he'd stand up for her. It means something to me, too, more than you might think. The gossip didn't fade. If anything, it intensified over the following weeks, fed by the natural suspicion small towns hold for outsiders and the peculiar circumstance of Cole Brennan's marriage. But Holly didn't falter. She taught with passion and precision, and slowly, reluctantly, even the most skeptical parents had to admit their children were learning more in 2 months under Mrs. Brennan than they had in 2 years under the previous teacher. Jesse excelled in mathematics, his quick mind soaking up numbers like dry earth drinking rain. Emma blossomed under her mother's gentle guidance, her reading improving daily. And the other children, initially suspicious of the new teacher's fancy Eastern ways, began to genuinely like her. Cole heard this secondhand, from Ezra at the store, from other ranchers, from Sheriff Hadley. He stayed away from town mostly, letting Holly build her life without his shadow looming over it. They'd agreed to maintain separate existences after all. The arrangement was working exactly as planned. Except it didn't feel like it was working. Cole found himself riding to town on increasingly flimsy pretenses. Supplies he didn't quite need. Business he could have handled another time. Always finding reasons to stop by the schoolhouse during lunch break or after classes ended, just to make sure Holly and the children were all right. You're hovering, Holly told him one afternoon in late October as he helped her carry books from the school to the cottage. I'm helping. You're hovering, and people are starting to notice. Let them notice. Cole. She stopped walking and looked at him directly. They'd graduated to first names somewhere in the past weeks, though Cole wasn't sure exactly when. We agreed to maintain distance, separate lives that occasionally intersect. If you keep appearing in town every other day, people will expect us to behave like a real married couple. And when we don't, when I'm here and you're at your ranch, they'll assume something's wrong. More gossip, more complications. She was right, of course. But the thought of staying away, of not seeing her quick smile when a student succeeded, or hearing her laugh at something Jesse said, felt wrong in ways Cole couldn't articulate. I'll stay away more, he said finally. But I'm not abandoning you to handle problems alone. If someone gives you trouble, you tell me. I can handle trouble. I know you can. Doesn't mean you should have to. The real trouble came in early November and it had a name. Marcus Dalton. Dalton owned the second largest ranch in the county, and he'd been trying to buy Cole's land for 3 years. Cole had refused every offer, no matter how generous, because the land had been in his family since before the war. His father had built the original cabin, his brother had died defending it during an Indian raid, and Rebecca was buried on the hill overlooking the valley. Selling would feel like betraying all of them, but Dalton was persistent, and with Cole now married, he'd found a new angle of attack. Cole was at the ranch, mending fence, when he saw Dalton riding up the trail with two of his men. He set down his tools and waited, hand resting on the colt at his hip. "Brennan," Dalton called out, reining in his horse. He was a big man, handsome in a rough way, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that calculated everything. "Heard congratulations are in order. You got yourself a wife." "I did." "Pretty thing from what I hear. Educated too. Must be quite a change from Rebecca." Cole's hand tightened on his gun, but he kept his voice level. "You ride all the way out here to discuss my marriage, Dalton?" "Just being neighborly, though I am curious how a hermit rancher managed to attract a woman like that. Word is she appeared on your doorstep half dead, and you married her to get the school to hire her. Awful convenient, don't you think?" "Get to the point." Dalton smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "The point is, married men get preference on land grants. You've been blocking my attempts to expand east because you hold the water rights to that creek. But with a wife, you could petition for the adjacent parcels, which means more land I can't access. So? So I'm making you one final offer, $20,000 for your entire spread, house, land, water rights, everything. That's more than fair market value, and it'll set you and your new family up comfortable. You could move to California, start fresh without the ghosts." "Not interested." "Think about it," Dalton pressed. "You're a rancher trying to maintain a marriage of convenience with a school teacher who lives in town. That's not sustainable, Brennan. Eventually, one of you will want more. She'll meet someone else, or you'll get tired of the pretense. Better to sell now, take the money, and end the arrangement before feelings get involved." I said no. "You're being stubborn. That land is wasted on you. You barely run 100 head, and half your acreage sits unused. I could make it productive. You could get off my property," Cole interrupted, his voice dropping to the dangerous quiet that had made men nervous during the war. "And you could stop talking about my wife like you know a damn thing about her or our marriage. The land's not for sale, Dalton. Not now, not ever. You want to expand east? Find another route." Dalton's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Brennan. I've been patient, but my patience has limits." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. This territory's changing. Small operations like yours won't survive. You'll lose everything trying to hold on to land you can't properly work. And when you do, I won't be making generous offers anymore. I'll wait until the bank forecloses and buy it at auction for pennies on the dollar." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. Cole watched them go, his gut tight with foreboding. Dalton wasn't bluffing. Men like him didn't make threats they couldn't back up, which meant Cole needed to be ready for whatever came next. That night, he rode to town and found Holly at the cottage, grading papers by lamplight, while Jesse and Emma slept in the next room. "Cole?" She looked up in surprise. "It's late. Is something wrong?" He told her about Dalton's visit, watching her face grow serious as he explained the implied threat. "He wants you to sell," she said slowly, "and he thinks threatening you is the way to get it. He thinks our marriage is a weakness he can exploit, thinks you're a liability." Holly's chin lifted in that familiar gesture. I'm not a liability. I know that. But Dalton doesn't, and he'll use whatever angle he can. I wanted you to know so you can be careful. If he or his men approach you, don't engage. Come get me or the sheriff. You think he'd threaten me or the children? I think men like Dalton do whatever they need to do to get what they want. And right now, he wants my land. Holly set down her pen and stood, moving to the window. Outside, Redemption Creek slept under a cold November moon. I've brought you nothing but complications, haven't I? No. Yes. Before I arrived, you were alone but uncomplicated. Now you have a wife to worry about, children to protect, and enemies circling because our arrangement makes you look vulnerable. Holly, maybe we should dissolve the marriage. You could say it wasn't working out, that I wasn't suited to frontier life. You'd be free to sell or not sell without worrying about me. The school would keep me on. My teaching's proven itself. We could, no. The word came out harder than Cole intended. He crossed to her, turning her to face him. We're not dissolving anything. This is exactly what Dalton wants, to drive a wedge between us, make us doubt the arrangement. We don't give him that satisfaction. But if I'm causing you trouble, you're not. Cole's hands were on her shoulders, and he realized suddenly how close they were standing, how her eyes reflected the lamplight, how her breath caught when he touched her. This trouble existed before you arrived. Dalton's been pushing for years. You're not the problem. You're just his latest excuse. Winter arrived early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with bitter wind and snow that turned the world white and unforgiving. The school closed for a week in mid-December when the temperature dropped so low that keeping the building warm became impossible. Holly and the children moved back to the ranch during the break, and Cole discovered that having them there felt more right than it should. Jesse helped with the animals, learning to milk the cow and collect eggs even in freezing weather. Emma insisted on helping Holly cook, her small hands learning to knead bread dough and stir stew, and Holly herself transformed from the severe school teacher into something warmer, more relaxed, when she wasn't maintaining professional dignity. This feels like a real home again, Cole said one evening without thinking, then immediately regretted it. Holly looked up from the socks she was darning. Does it bother you, having us here? No, that's the problem. How is that a problem? Cole struggled to explain what he barely understood himself. We agreed this would be practical. Separate, but having you here, seeing the kids every morning, hearing voices in the cabin, it doesn't feel separate. It feels like family, and family means caring. Caring means pain when it's taken away. Understanding softened Holly's expression. You're afraid. I'm cautious. You're afraid. You're afraid, she repeated gently. You lost Rebecca and your baby. You built walls to keep from feeling that pain again. And now we're here and the walls are developing cracks, and that terrifies you. Doesn't it terrify you? Cole challenged. You lost your husband. You know what it's like to watch someone change from the person you loved into someone you fear. You know how it feels to be trapped with no way out except through tragedy. Why would you risk that again? Because I'm not trapped with you, Bob, Holly said simply. That's the difference. Thomas trapped me with poverty, with children who depended on me, with social expectations that said I had to stay no matter what he did. You gave me freedom, a profession, independence, the ability to leave if I choose. That's not a trap. That's a gift. But you're not leaving. No, I'm not. She set down her darning and met his eyes directly. I'm not leaving because I don't want to. Because Jesse smiles more in a month here than he did in a year in Philadelphia. Because Emma's nightmares have stopped. Because I can breathe here, Cole. I can teach and have a home and not wake up terrified every morning. Why would I leave that? Because I'm difficult, closed off, not the kind of man who makes a good husband. You're not trying to be my husband. That's what makes this work. She smiled faintly. You're trying to be my friend. My partner in a practical arrangement. And somehow that's more honest and more valuable than any romantic notion of marriage ever was. She was right, but it didn't make the confusion in Cole's chest any easier to bear. Because somewhere between that first desperate knock on his door and this moment by the fire, something had shifted. The practical arrangement had developed complications of the emotional variety, and Cole didn't know how to handle feelings he'd sworn never to experience again. The trouble he'd been expecting from Dalton arrived 3 days before Christmas. Cole was riding fence line in the south pasture when he saw smoke rising from his barn. He spurred Caesar into a gallop, heart pounding with dread, and arrived to find the structure fully engulfed in flames. Jesse was already there, dragging buckets of water from the well, while Holly organized a desperate fire line. Cole jumped down and joined them, but it was already too late. The barn was old timber, dry as kindling, and it burned with terrifying speed. They managed to save the horses, got them out of the corral before the flames spread, but the barn itself was a total loss. By the time the fire died down to smoldering ash, Cole's winter hay was gone, his tools destroyed, and his emergency supplies reduced to charred debris. "It wasn't an accident," Sheriff Hadley said grimly, examining the remains the next morning. He'd ridden out as soon as word reached town. "See here? Multiple ignition points in the smell of kerosene. Someone set this deliberately." "Dalton," Cole said flatly. "Can you prove it?" "No, but who else wants me desperate enough to sell?" Hadley sighed. "Without proof, I can't arrest him. But I'll have a talk, make it clear we're watching. Maybe that'll be enough to back him off. And if it's not, then you be careful, Cole. Real careful. Men like Dalton don't stop until they get what they want or someone makes them stop permanently." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Holly, who was comforting Emma near the house. "You've got more to protect now than just yourself. Keep that in mind." After Hadley left, Cole stood staring at the smoking ruins of his barn, calculating the cost of rebuilding, of replacing the hay, of surviving the winter without the shelter and supplies he'd counted on. Holly appeared at his side, her face smudged with soot. "How bad is it?" "Bad. I've got some savings, but rebuilding and replacing supplies will take most of it. I'll have to sell some stock to make up the difference, which means less breeding stock for spring." "Will you lose the ranch?" "Not immediately, but if Dalton keeps pushing, keeps causing problems." Cole didn't finish the thought. They both knew how it ended. Bankruptcy, foreclosure, Dalton buying the land at auction just as he'd promised. "Then we fight back," Holly said firmly. "We? You're not alone in this, Cole. This arrangement, this marriage, it's real enough legally, which means his attack on you is an attack on me and my children. And I didn't survive everything I've survived just to let some bully rancher destroy the first safe place we've found." Cole looked at her, this woman who'd appeared on his doorstep more dead than alive, and now stood ready to fight beside him, and felt something shift permanently in his chest. "All right," he said, "we fight back together, but carefully. Dalton's dangerous, and I won't risk you or the children." "Agreed. So what's our first move?" "We document everything. Every interaction with Dalton, every incident, every threat. We build a case so strong that when we finally go to the authorities, they can't ignore it." Holly nodded, her gray eyes fierce with determination. "Consider it done. I'll start keeping a journal, dates, times witnesses. And we tell Jesse and Emma to report anything suspicious, anyone watching the house or following them." "This isn't what you signed up," Cole said quietly. "When you knocked on my door, you were looking for safety. Now I'm dragging you into a range war." "You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm choosing to stand with you." She touched his arm lightly. "That's what partners do, isn't it? Stand together when trouble comes?" Christmas came quietly to the Brennan Ranch, marked more by survival than celebration. Cole spent his dwindling savings on lumber and rebuilt a smaller, more modest barn. Holly and the children helped where they could, Jesse proving surprisingly handy with a hammer, Emma keeping everyone fed with simple meals, stretched to make supplies last. The school reopened after New Year's, and Holly threw herself back into teaching with renewed focus. But now there was an edge to their routine, a watchfulness. Jesse kept his eyes open on the way to and from school. Emma stayed close to her mother, and Cole, who'd been trying to maintain distance, found himself riding into town almost daily. "You're hovering again," Holly said one afternoon in early January, but there was no censure in her tone, just acknowledgement that the rules of their arrangement had changed. "I'm being cautious." "You're being protective." There's a difference, or is there? She smiled faintly. With you? Sometimes it's hard to tell. The retaliation when it came was more subtle than fire. Cole started noticing his fences cut in the north pasture, cattle wandering onto Dalton's land where they'd conveniently be rounded up with his herds. Small things at first, easy to dismiss as accidents or natural breakdown. But the pattern became clear. Someone was systematically sabotaging his operation. He documented it all, just as he'd promised Holly. Every cut fence, every missing quote, every suspicious interaction. The journal grew thick with evidence, but without witnesses or proof tying Dalton directly to the incidents, it was just Cole's word against a powerful rancher's. Then in late January, everything changed. Cole was in town when he heard shouting from the schoolhouse. He ran, hand on his gun, and found Holly standing between Marcus Dalton and the schoolroom door, her face pale but defiant. "I said you can't interrupt my class," Holly repeated, her voice steady despite the fear Cole could see in her eyes. "If you have business with the school, you'll present it to the council during proper hours." "I have business with you, Mrs. Brennan," Dalton said smoothly. "Or should I say, Mrs. Brennan, the fraud." Cole pushed through the small crowd that had gathered. "What's going on here?" Dalton turned with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, the devoted husband. Perfect timing. I was just explaining to your wife that I've done some investigating into her background. Very interesting what I found." Holly's face went carefully blank, but Cole saw her hands tremble. "What investigation?" Cole demanded. "Sent some telegrams to Philadelphia. Asked around about Holly Ashford and her late husband Thomas." Dalton produced a folded paper from his pocket. Got a very interesting response from the police department. Seems there were some questions about Thomas Ashford's death, about whether it was truly an accident or whether his widow might have had a hand in it. The crowd murmured, and Cole saw shock and speculation ripple through the gathering townspeople. "That's a lie," Holly said, her voice low but fierce. "I was investigated and cleared. The police ruled it an accidental death." "Cleared due to lack of evidence," Dalton corrected, "which isn't quite the same as proven innocent, is it? Makes a man wonder what other secrets you're hiding, Mrs. Brennan. Makes him wonder if Cole here knows what kind of woman he married." "That's enough," Cole said, stepping between Holly and Dalton. "You've got a problem with my wife. You take it up with me, but you do it away from her students and away from decent people who don't need to hear your poison." "I'm just sharing information," Dalton said innocently. "Information the good people of Redemption Creek deserve to know about the woman teaching their children. After all, if she killed her first husband, who's to say she won't target her second? Especially if he's standing between her and something she wants." "You son of a—" Cole started forward, but Sheriff Hadley appeared, gripping his arm. "That's enough from everyone," Hadley said firmly. "Mr. Dalton, unless you have proof of criminal activity, actual proof, not speculation, you need to stop making accusations." Mrs. Brennan was cleared by the Philadelphia police. "That's good enough for this jurisdiction." "Is it, though?" Dalton looked at the crowd, playing to them. "Is it good enough for you parents to trust your children with a woman under a cloud of suspicion? Is it good enough?" "Yes." The voice came from an unexpected source, Martha Henderson, the pastor's wife. She pushed through the crowd to stand beside Holly. "It is good enough. Mrs. Brennan has proven herself an excellent teacher these past months. My granddaughter has learned more under her instruction than in 3 years prior. I don't care about rumors from Philadelphia. I care about what I see here, now, and what I see is a good woman doing good work." "I agree," Ezra Walsh added, stepping forward. "This smells like a campaign to drive Mrs. Brennan away. Makes me wonder who benefits if she leaves town." Dalton's expression hardened. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting you've made your point, such as it is," Ezra interrupted. "Now move along before the sheriff decides you're disturbing the peace." Dalton looked around at the crowd, at the faces showing more suspicion of him than of Holly, and apparently decided he'd lost this round. "Fine, but you haven't heard the last of this." He tipped his hat mockingly at Holly. "Mrs. Brennan? Or is it Mrs. Murderer? Hard to keep track." Cole lunged, but Hadley and Ezra held him back while Dalton walked away, his point made, even if he hadn't won the crowd. The aftermath of Dalton's accusation played out over the next 2 weeks in ways that surprised Cole. Instead of turning against Holly, Most of the town rallied around her. Parents who'd been skeptical of the Eastern teacher now defended her against outside interference. The school council issued a statement supporting Mrs. Brennan's position. Even the gossips who'd initially questioned the marriage now seemed offended that Dalton would try to manipulate them with old Philadelphia scandal. But the damage was done in other ways. Holly grew quieter, more withdrawn. Jesse's old wariness returned. Emma started having nightmares again. And Cole found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd dragged Holly and the children into something worse than what they'd escaped. It was Holly who finally forced the conversation. She appeared at the ranch on a Saturday in early February, riding Caesar with Jesse and Emma. Cole was mending harness in the rebuilt barn when she found him. "We need to talk," she said simply. Cole set down his tools. "Kids?" "Playing in the snow. We have a few minutes." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I want to end our arrangement." The words hit like a physical blow, even though Cole had been half expecting them. "Because of what Dalton said?" "No, yes, partially." Holly shook her head in frustration. "Because this isn't what either of us agreed to. We said practical, separate, mutually beneficial. But it's become complicated. You're in town every other day. I'm riding out here on weekends. We're living like a real family, Cole. And I don't think either of us knows how to handle that." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we should either commit to this properly, make it a real marriage, real partnership, real everything, or we should dissolve it honestly before feelings get hurt." Cole's throat tightened. "And which do you want?" "Which do you want?" Holly countered. "Because I won't trap you into something you don't choose freely. You've been good to me, to my children. You have given us safety and opportunity. But if this is just obligation, if you're staying bound to me because you feel responsible, then I release you from that, honestly, completely." "What if it's not obligation?" The words came out rough, barely above a whisper. "What if somewhere in the past months, this arrangement became something more?" Holly's breath caught. "Then say it, plainly, because I can't bear wondering anymore." Cole crossed to her, taking her hands in his calloused grip. "I don't want to dissolve the marriage, I wanted to make it real, not because of Dalton or land grants or practical benefits, because you make this place feel like home again. Because Jesse's learning to trust, and Emma's laughing, and you—" He stopped, struggling with words he hadn't spoken in 3 years. "You remind me what it's like to care about someone, to want it to come home, to have something worth protecting besides dirt and cattle." Tears spilled down Holly's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I was terrified you'd say yes, that you wanted out. Because I don't want out, Cole. I want in, filet."